Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. We're coming to you with our first show of 2026, which means it is time to break out our projected rosters. Bob wrote them up over at our Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com last week, and we're going to break them down on tonight's show. We're going to look all the way up from AAA Norfolk down to the Dominican Summer League and talk about how the opening day rosters at each level might shake out this spring and this summer. But first, as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome some new members to our Patreon community. These are, in fact, our first new members of 2026. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, big influx, I guess, because we have the top 50 countdown going on over at the Patreon. People want to be a part of that, and you should too. So join Scott Phillips, Brennan Smedley, James Powell, Trisha Lord, and I think that's it for now. But thank you so much to Trisha, James, Brendan, and Scott. Really appreciate the support. Don't forget to, if you're not already, subscribe to our YouTube. If you want to see our faces, I won't put any adjectives before that while we record our podcast. Please feel free to. And if we get to 1,000, I will recap the Wire, which I've never seen and people make fun of me for. So if that's any incentive whatsoever, subscribe to our YouTube, and thanks to our new patrons.
And as a reminder, you can access our Patreon countdown for $3, $5, or $10 a month at our paid levels and have access to much more, including bonus coverage throughout the season. And we are very early in the countdown at this point. We're not even in number 45 yet, so get in on the ground level today. And now we'll turn our attention to our projected rosters. And this is a fun exercise that Bob does every year on the show. And it just takes a look at where players are going to start the following season and breaks down the rosters, including starting lineup, the bench, the rotation, the bullpen, and then sums it all up with a nice watchability rating, which comes in very handy for those of you who have MILB TV to know on a given night, okay, which team is going to be the best one to watch when they all start at 6:35. Early on, at least, this can serve as a helpful guide. And we're going to break down what I guess were some tough decisions for Bob and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each roster, beginning with the AAA Norfolk Tides. And no surprises here as far as the position players are concerned. The headline is in the outfield, where you have Enrique Bradfield Jr. in the middle of what should be a talented defensive outfield as long as everybody stays healthy, because he'll be flanked by Reed Trimble in left field to go along with Judd Fabian in right field. In the rotation, Cade Povitz and Brandon Young, after getting extensive time in the majors last season, are projected by Bob to begin the 2026 season in AAA, where they will be joined in the Tide starting six by Trey Gibson, Nestor Herman, Levi Wells, and Cameron Weston. This also looks to be a really strong bullpen that includes the likes of recent 40-man roster additions Anthony Nunez and Cameron Foster, as well as Tyson Neighbors, Trey Sprite, Alex Pham, Chase McDermott, and a few other arms of note. Nick, I want to start with you here. The Tides, by the way, settling in a watchability rating of 8 out of 10. Nick, I want to start with you here. What are your thoughts on this roster as a whole?
You're definitely tuning in for the pitching. First and foremost, with this roster, the lineup is going to have nights where they score no runs on 2 hits. I think if this lineup holds, but it has really good depth. Like, this is a lot of your AAA team. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be an extension of your big league bench, right? And these are a lot of guys on this roster who can help if needed. But yeah, the pitching is definitely the star. I think on the hitting side, though, I will just say, like, Reed Trimble, first and foremost, sticks out to me. Of course, I mean, that's, of course, Enrique Bradfield Jr., but I'll talk about Reed Trimble. You guys can take Bradfield. Trimble, look, first mostly healthy season of his career and still only 90 games, but we saw the type of hitter that he could be. And that potential was exactly why I was high on him for years since the Orioles drafted him, and really only given up hope going into 2025 because I just felt like the massive injuries he had again and again were just too much to overcome. But credit to him for sticking it out, and he hit 17 home runs last year and had a 126 WRC plus between AA and AAA, and yeah, good power numbers, decent like contact whiff rates. Like he's not a black hole like some other guys in this lineup, but it's going to be interesting to see if he can stay healthy for a second straight year. But yeah, this pitching class, I hope and pray that the Norfolk rotation is led by Cade Povich and Brandon Young, because that means they've done just a little bit more on the major league rotation side of things.
Yeah, that's, I mean, cautiously optimistic. I think we all expect one more starting pitcher on the majors, which, yeah, that would hopefully, unless they want to put Young and or Povich in the bullpen to start 2026, it would push those guys down. But I agree with Vivek in the chat. Best prospect pitching core AAA Norfolk has ever had. I mean, how could it not be? We've talked about it a lot. Yeah, that's pushing a lot of the watchability rating here to an 8 out of 10. I will say the defense should be really strong, at least in the field. That outfield, not too many balls going to fall in there. Louis Vasquez, Frederick Bencosme can pick it. Not sure how good Peyton Neals is defensively, but Silas Ardoin. And, of course, there's Heston Kjerstad sitting there. Who knows if he's even playing baseball, but, I mean, gotta kind of pencil him in here. Bullpen is lights out. Bench is okay. Although it will be a little more watchable if Big Christmas can pass through waivers and start in AAA, and maybe even Mark Luciano. Why can't I think of his first name off the top of my head? But who they just claimed today as well. We're doing that thing where we're trying to Ryan O'Hearn somebody down into AAA, get them fixed, and then bring them up to be a factor in the majors. But yeah, I think the pitching leads the way here, obviously. With the bullet, though, I mean, it's going to be tough when these games start, because I want to be tuned into Norfolk when the pitchers are on the mound, and when it's the at-bats, maybe I'll switch over to any other level that's going on, unless the vaunted Enrique Bradfield Jr. is batting and we're seeing him lace line drives into the outfield and impacting the ball. I don't know. I'm just trying to start something in the chats, but yeah, I'm excited for Norfolk, mostly for the pitching.
To me, this rotation strikes a perfect balance where you get in your three prospects that were in AAA at the end of the year. Gibson is the top pitching prospect in the system. You have him backed by Wells and Herman. That's a really fun group. Cameron Weston was the Tide's best starter last year. He goes back there, should be able to give you good innings again. Hopefully gets a shot at the big league at some point. And I agree with you guys. If Cade Povich and Brandon Young are in the AAA rotation to start next season, it means the Orioles added a lot of depth to the major league team over the course of the year. And it's really easy right now to say this before injuries start to set in and things really start to shake up. But if this bullpen looks as is at the beginning of the year and it sticks for a while, the Tides are not going to blow a lot of leads. It feels like most leads after the sixth inning or so are going to be safe with them. And I feel like there's, in this group, at least three pitchers that could have a positive impact on the big league bullpen next year. Nunez and Foster certainly being two of those three. And then really, if you're looking for a third, Chase McDermott, we've seen flashes of in the past. Not a good year for him last year as a starter, but I think going to the bullpen full-time should be a good boost for him. Grant Wolfram is one of those guys where the data has always been really good. It hasn't translated to results in the major leagues yet, but I'm happy he's still in the organization, and I'm very, very excited to see what Tyson Nabris does this year. I thought he should have gotten to AAA before last season ended. I have every expectation he's going to start there to begin this season, and I could see him being somebody that just dominates this year, and we're talking about him being in Baltimore's bullpen in August and September.
Yeah, the bullpen is really fun. I will address a question from EJ in the chat. Where do Selby, Geraldo, Espada, Josh Walker go in the pen? Carlos Tavera? There's a lot of names. They just signed another minor league free agent today, left-hander. Can't remember the name off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, there's only so many names I can list down the right-hand side. Obviously, there's going to be room for these guys through injuries or extended spring training, and the rosters are bigger in AAA than any other level. So this is just the highlighted names here on the right-hand side. And I could say this is almost like I mean, a bad major league team, but like almost a major league team type of bullpen here between, at least in a couple of years. I think Nunez, Neighbors, McDermott, Wolfram maybe are all going to be guys that are a factor in the Orioles bullpen. So nice to see them get this time to shine. And with Neighbors, yeah, it's going to be interesting because he's not Rule 5 eligible at the end of the season, and the Orioles have so many guys that will be. Does he force the issue? Because they can definitely be conservative when it comes to his time in AAA before they give him the boost up to the majors. But if he's dominating, I mean, you're not going to leave a guy that's pitching extremely well at the back end of games down in AAA when he could help a competitive team in the majors.
Yeah, for me with this bullpen, it's Anthony Nunez first and foremost. It's like 96, 97 mile an hour fastball with a 117 stuff plus slider. Like it's impressive. Tremendous backstory, very real, very loud stuff. Already on the 40-man roster, so maybe he gets a big league call up later this season. I have no issues if I'm the high man on Cameron Foster. I really want to see what that kid can do. He's not a kid anymore. He's actually on the older side, but I mean, he's on the 40-man roster for right now. Still sitting 95 with a ton of care on his fastball, 7 feet of extension. Like there's a lot to like with the fastball with Cameron Foster. And if he can be like an up and down, optionable reliever for the next couple of years, I think that's a big win as part of that trade coming over from the Mets. I want to see what Trace Bright can do. I want to see if he can build on what he was able to do after transitioning to the relief role in the second half of last year. And yeah, like you guys talking about with Tyson Neighbors, just it felt really great. Go back to the trade deadline, and we were going over those listener submitted trade ideas, and I don't know, whatever the trade was with the Padres, and I'm like, if you make a move with the Padres, I want Tyson Neighbors. Kid was an animal at Kansas State. It's one of the better relief only prospects in all of baseball, and then boom, Padres trade 90% of their viable prospects that's left in their system to Baltimore, and Tyson Neighbors is an Oriole. I do agree. I think it's kind of hard to see him getting major league innings next year or this season. We are in 2026 now. I think it's hard to see him getting innings unless he really forces that issue, just because you've got a lot of other guys who have gotten whiffs of major league time, and guys like Nunez and Foster who are on the 40-man already, but still pretty much a fantastic luxury to have. And to go back to the rotation real quick, give my thoughts on that. These guys, I get a lot of loud fastballs with this group as well. Like Levi Wells sat 94, 95. That grades out as a plus offering. His slider isn't far behind and generated like a near 50% whiff rate last season. Herman already has a plus fastball. It's like 20 inches of induced vertical break. It's a thing of beauty. And that's all with a Major League Baseball. He sat 92, like 92 and a half last year in AAA. And if he's going to be adding a tick or two, I think he's already said in the Steve Molesky interview, that's one of his goals to add velo this offseason. If he's going to add a tick or two to his already 60 grade offering, then that's going to be an even more impressive pitch. I know his fastball got hit really hard. It was a very small AAA sample, but the fastball got hit hard in AAA with pretty much no whiffs. His breaking stuff, his secondary offerings, all had huge whiff rates in very small sample there. So a positive sign for Herman and Gibson. Just like, man, I've been saying this for 2 years. I don't think a lot of people truly understand just how good his stuff is, especially like outside of Baltimore, and how much he actually improved last year. The kid's got 2 mid-90s fastballs and 7 secondary offerings, 8 secondary offerings. I don't know how many pitches he has, and all of them have like 50, 60 grades on them. So like we know he had real troubles adjusting to the Major League Baseball. By the time he hit AAA last year, he had already reached his career high in innings. They immediately identified what they were going to do to fix that issue, and he's had all offseason to work on it. So I'm as excited as you can be on the pitching front, especially when it comes to the big three there in Gibson, Herman, and Wells. And to see like Cameron Weston go from like the top arm in that Norfolk rotation to like the number 5, number 6 in the rotation, that's still a guy who also has 6, 7 pitches in his arsenal from a little bit of a unique angle, and threw 135, 136 innings last year. Like, again, another really tremendous depth asset to have here on the AAA side.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very funny. Weston by the end of the year was like the one guy that I'm tuning in for, other than obviously when Gibson and Herman made their little glimpses there. But yeah, Trey Gibson is reminding me of Kyle Bradish a lot, where we're like trying to hype him up and nobody is like really understanding what we have in Kyle Bradish until he comes up. He struggles for his first 5-10 starts as you tend to get from pitching prospects. And everyone's like, I thought you said he was good. And now it's like he's a Cy Young contender and he's the ace on this team. But I think Trey Gibson, there's not enough and not as much room in the starting rotation on the Orioles staff. But I think it's going to get to the point where he's going to get a chance because his numbers are going to be so good. His stuff is so good. And there will be eventually a chance for him to come up and show what he can do. And hopefully he at least gets some experience to look ahead to 2027, 2028.
Let's go over to AA Chesapeake now. And this is a group where when I first saw the projected roster, I thought the pitching staff was the strength, but there are some hitters in here that are interesting. We'll get into that in a moment. One thing that I think I was surprised by, and Bob, I think we'll be able to get into this a little bit more in a second, is that Creed Willems, who really was the Bay Sox best hitter over the course of last season, 16 home runs, 118 WRC plus, is projected to be the Bay Sox primary catcher next year, with Ethan Anderson basically catcher 1A after reaching AA at the end of last season. You look around at that offense, Anderson, De Los Santos, and Brandon Butterworth on the infield corners at first and third base, respectively, with Aaron Estrada coming off of a really strong 2025 season, slated to go back and be the Bay Sox primary second baseman. His double play partner would be Griffo Farrell at shortstop. And then in the outfield, Tavian Josenberger in left, Douglas Hodo in center, Thomas Sosa in right. And going over that pitching staff that I mentioned just a moment ago, Luis De Leon, who is now starting to get a lot of love nationally after a strong performance in the Arizona Fall League, went to AA briefly at the end of last year. He's slated to go back there and top a Bay Sox rotation that would also include Jerron Watts Brown, Blake Money, Zach Fruit, Cohen Aiken, and Michael Calden. You look at the bullpen, there's some interesting arms here, including Micah Aspin, a recent guest of the show, acquired from the Tigers in the Charlie Morton trade at the deadline last year. Yaki Rivera, who had really strong numbers at AA last year, not quite enough room for him in AAA's bullpen, so we have him going back to the Bay Sox, being joined by Tanner Smith, Carter Rustad, among some other interesting bullpen arms. And then on your bench, Adam Retzbach, Max Wagner, Carter Young, and Jake Cunningham. So, Bob, let's start with Creed Willems. Really strong year last year, but I'm guessing your sense is that he will go back to AA for at least a little bit more seasoning?
Yeah, I think so. It was hard between Silas Ardway and Maverick Hanley, who's still in the organization, I believe. I think he was taken off of the 40-man, but is still here. And I don't know how much of a catcher Willie Vasquez is, but that's a minor league free agent signing as well. So just, not necessarily room at the moment. And I think, eventually he's just going to have to go up to AAA to get that time, even if it's only catching like once or twice a week and playing some first base and DH time as well. But I think he starts back at Bowie at least, and then we'll see how things go after that. Obviously, I think AA has a chance to become very watchable, much more watchable. And going back to the watchability rating, I have no one under a 7.5 and no one over an 8.5. Like, just doing this exercise this year, it was definitely like the deepest as far as amount of guys where I'm like easily putting there, want to see them play, want to see how they do this year. But there's no like stack teams like there was in AAA a couple of years ago, or I think it was high A we thought was going to be stacked a year or two ago. Didn't quite end up happening as much, but it's much more well-rounded. But I think these teams in the upper minors have a chance as the year goes on to become that as they kind of the talent pipeline gets clogged up again at the upper ends of the system. But I think to start the year, Creed Williams is in AA.
Yeah, they're also going to sign another catcher as well. Someone's going to be the taxi squad guy. I imagine probably Maverick Hanley, or whichever veteran they decide to bring in. But they're going to add another catcher, and I agree. I think you're going to see Ethan Anderson and Creed split time there behind the plate in Bowie. But the AA roster, like, honestly, I go back to last year, and I think here's where you start to see the growth and the quality of infield prospects in the system. After seeing last year, like, it was a very clear weakness. And like, yeah, he's far from the best defensive prospect, but Aaron Estrada is 21 years old and made tremendous progress with his bat over the last 2 years. I think you give him some grace and time to figure it out defensively. This is an above average hit tool with real potential to pop double digit home runs. He's aggressive at the plate, but it's not wild. And actually doesn't turn 21 until January 13th. So he's going to play all year as a 21-year-old in AA, potentially get to AAA by the end of the year. Like a 135 WRC plus in 80 high A games and a 138 WRC plus in 27 AA games, like 3.5 years younger than the average AA player. Like that's what you want to see. Age, level, production, Aaron Estrada, check. And then Brandon Butterworth there, like, again, a reminder, Butterworth had one of the largest exit velo gains in all of minor league baseball last season. He went from 96 mile per hour, 90th percentile EV to 102.8 miles per hour in 2025. So a tremendous jump. I think it's like a 20 grade to a 45 grade jump there in one season for Butterworth. So excited to see him. Yeah, I just think those are just two examples. Like you look at the infield prospects again. Who was Colin Burns was probably one of the best infield prospects in the upper minors last year. And he's not in the system anymore, so I don't feel bad about the jokes anymore. But while his dad thought he was a better prospect than Jackson Holliday and wasn't afraid to express that opinion, when you have other prominent figures kind of laughing at his expense, you kind of understand where he sits in the system at that point. Pulled it up real quick. Yeah, the 2025 roster prediction piece. I'd say Tavian Josenberger is the top infield prospect between AA and AAA, and then maybe Freddie Ben-Cosme 2, and then Burns at 3. So like pretty rough. To now have Aaron Estrada and Brandon Butterworth kind of leading the way up here. And Griff O'Farrell, like, look, none of us are believers in him. Wasn't really excited at all about the pick when it happened live, but he didn't impact the baseball at all last year. And there was no power in the bat in college. And that if you watched him at UVA, you saw that. You saw the lack of power. He kind of is who he is. But if he can just add a touch of impact, he steps up and becomes kind of good quality, I think, AAA infield depth with his defense. It's not elite speed, but he's smart. He's a technician in a lot of areas of his game that he can make up for some of the deficiencies. So a higher floor guy there. So yeah, the infield stood out to me specifically, and the growth in that area in the system.
That is a great point there. Even Anderson De Los Santos, who at one point we were pretty high on as a third base prospect, he's more of a first base prospect. He does still play third base occasionally. I don't know if he's going to be able to stay there long term, but he had a 121 WRC plus in high A last year at 21 years old. So I think he's kind of gone deep under the radar as like, there's still something there in the bat. The bat speed is there. He does impact the ball. He's improved in certain areas. Like he walked 10% less in 2025 than he did in 2024, walked 1% more than he did the year before. So don't give up on Anderson De Los Santos completely there in AA, and it's a better hitting environment as well. Griff O'Farrell, I'm excited to see how he will be able to do getting out of Aberdeen full-time. And like you said, Brandon Butterworth, who clearly the Orioles targeted for a reason, and he showed that almost immediately. Strada is the stud who has a chance to be like a top 100 prospect by mid-season potentially if he keeps up what he was doing. And you see Tavian Josenberger in left field. They'll probably split second base and left field between the two of them, honestly, because Josenberger can play the infield. Estrada will get time in the outfield. The only one here that is a little bit out of place is Douglas Hodo in center field, but he did have a great 2024 and flashes of success in 2025. So not too bad, honestly. At least he can go out there, get the ball, and we'll see what he does third season in AA.
I feel confident in saying, and I'm going to go over the pitchers in a second, but I feel confident in saying that at least one of those outfielders is better next year than they were last year. And Sosa is probably the easiest pick there because he's the youngest. He has the highest ceiling of the bunts. He missed a lot of time last year with injury. So I think that if he has a healthy season in 2026, he could take a step forward. Josenberger, that was my breakout pick last year. And unfortunately, injuries just got in the way. The bat didn't show up like I thought it would when he was healthy. And I'm not going to sit here and predict for a second year in a row that he's going to break out. I don't see that happening. But I do think that if you get a healthier Tavian Josenberger in 2026, you're going to get a better player. Now, I'll throw out this question for the pitching staff. Deron Watts-Brown, Blake Money, Luis De Leon, all three, for various reasons, come into 2026 with a lot of momentum. Watts-Brown had a really good season last year. You could argue statistically that he's ready for AAA, but I do agree that he's going to start back in AA. Money just put together a really solid season from start to finish last year. And then De Leon, as I mentioned a moment ago, getting a lot of buzz after his time in the Fall League, which was on the heels of a great 2025 season. Of those three, which one is the first to AAA?
I think it's got to be Watts-Brown, just because I think he's the oldest. I think he's probably got he definitely got the most experience at AA. I think it was a little more than half a season, and I think he's got the stuff that he can at least play out of the AAA bullpen if they want to go that route, or I'm sure they'll delay that as much as possible. But I think, again, it probably just depends who's healthy, who's performing. But as things stand now, I'd say Watts-Brown, then Money, then De Leon. And De Leon's the biggest prospect, but he only had, 6 starts in AA, 5 or 6 starts. So, yeah, he could use a little bit of time there. It's okay. Let him dominate. Let him get comfortable with all the changes he made at the end of the season that put him on this radar that he has put himself on. But I'm almost more interested what they're going to do in the back end of this rotation in Chesapeake, formerly Bowie Bay Sox, because Zach Fruit, we all want to see as a reliever. Cohen Aiken, yeah, he had an interesting year, bouncing all around the system, showing flashes of success. And then Michael Caldone, who kind of went under the radar as an interesting guy. I think if there could be a breakout, it could be one of those 3 guys, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. It's Watts-Brown, and he was the guy that I wanted to highlight anyway in this rotation. We've talked a lot about Luis De Leon with his time in the Arizona Fall League in this offseason, but with Watts-Brown, it's all about the fastball. Like, we know the slider is fantastic. A couple of other offerings that could be at least average secondaries in the big leagues, but the fastball needed work done to it that isn't going to be done in the handful of starts he got at the end of the year after the trade deadline. So this was an offseason project. And if they find a way to give him a viable fastball, you add Watts-Brown to the list of fun AAA depth starter options as a potential back of the rotation major league starter. If not, you see if he can work out of the bullpen, but he's the starter among that group that I'm going to be paying the closest attention to, just because I'm greedy. I want as many as potential starting pitching prospects as possible. And I think Watts-Brown can definitely join them on that list. Again, it's all up to that fastball though. And I would go up to the bullpen real quick, unless you guys have anything else about the rotation. But you talk about what are they going to do as far as some of these guys in the back end. Like Fruit, I think you stick back in the starting rotation in 2026 to give it one more shot. But also, this bullpen is awesome. I love a lot of it. I mean, every single arm here pretty much is intriguing. I'm not in on Juan Nunez at all anymore. 20-something innings in 2024, less than 20 innings last year. He's 25 now, hasn't pitched in 2 years. He was left wide open for the taking in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft and went unselected. So I think the league spelled out clearly what's there or not there with Juan Nunez, unfortunately. But yeah, Yaki Rivera continues to be a highly intriguing arm, and it's hard to believe he's still somehow only 22 years old. Micah Ashman, like you touched on earlier, great numbers last year. Go listen to our interview with him. Great guy, fun interview. We'll see what he does in year 2. Tanner Smith had that strong Arizona Fall League season. Carter Rustad's older arm, but he's produced. And then Ramon Gomez, honestly, I have zero expectations going into 2026. Do we even know what his injury was and why we didn't see him last year? Yeah, we don't know. So I have zero expectations going into 2026, but I mean, if you like fastballs that sit 100 miles per hour, I guess he could be a fun option. But yeah, and this is where, if you could list 20 guys, there are some other names that I think are going to be some pleasant surprises.
Zane Barnhart, Edgar Portes.
Yeah, these are some guys that could show up in this AA bullpen at points throughout the year that could impress and become good at minimum AAA depth. So it's, we went from just year of the pitcher to last year is so much emphasis about like the relief only prospects and everything. Honestly, like some people maybe don't care. Minor league relief prospect, cool. But this is actually an area where late in games, because my process is usually I'll have the Orioles on the big TV, and then I pick my game for the night on the laptop, so I can just focus on like that one game. But the next day, the other 3 games, I could just quickly scroll through, fast forward through the parts we don't need. Like you're barely watching the last 3 innings or so of the games for these bullpen guys. That's not going to be the case this year. I'm going to have to spend some extra time each day, the following day, to catch up on the end of all these games to check out these bullpen arms.
Yeah, I'll just say with Tanner Smith, and I've talked about this a little bit recently. I really liked what we saw from him at Aberdeen last year, the way he was able to cut back the walks as the season went on, particularly after the trade with the Padres. The fastball data in the Arizona Fall League, pumping high 90s consistently, was really good. So if you're looking for someone who could be a breakout candidate, definitely circle that name. And yeah, really just top to bottom, this bullpen is good. And with Ramon Gomez, anything you get from him from my vantage point is a bonus, because like you said, Nick, we don't know what the injury was last year. So we don't know when we're going to see him in 2026. We don't know when he's on the mound, how often he's going to throw strikes. But he throws 100 plus miles per hour consistently. So if nothing else, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the radar gun light up with 105 and just shake my head as it hits the backstop and rolls back out to the pitcher.
All the when's Tommy John happening? Well, in every highlight video we post, whenever he throws above 100 miles an hour. Can't wait for that too.
But in all honesty, I am excited about Gomez, Ashman. Yaki Rivera, I think, is another guy who's kind of underrated. He's got really ridiculous stuff. Tanner Smith, very intrigued by. I think this is probably another guy that the Orioles zeroed in on, and you quickly saw why when he came over, and then in the Arizona Fall League. Yeah, year of the pitcher, just the organization of the pitcher. Like, this is just what we do now around here.
Now we'll go down to High A Frederick, where work is underway to get Nameo Field at Harry Grove Stadium ready for the return of High A baseball. The Orioles shifting their High A affiliate, which had been in Aberdeen, back to Frederick for the 2026 season and beyond. And you look at this lineup, this is a pretty interesting group, thanks to an influx of 2025 draft picks, as well as some breakouts from a year ago, headlined by Nate George, who we have penciled in as the Keys everyday center fielder. And then going around the horn in the infield, Yasmiel Bousset behind the plate, Ellis Cuevas at first, Colin Yeaman at second, Leandro Arias at third, Bahia Aloy at short, with Vance Honeycutt in left field, looking to rebound from a very disappointing debut season in 2025. George in center with Ike Iris and right, and then turning our attention over to the rotation, Wellington Aracena, the most acclaimed pitching prospect, I guess you would say, that came from the Mets in the Gregory Soto trade at the deadline last year. Showed flashes of good stuff with Aberdeen last season. We have him projected to go back to High A to start 2026, followed by Joseph Giroux, a fairly high pick in the 2025 draft. Boston Bateman, who came over from the Padres in the Ryan O'Hearn, Ramon Laureano trade and spent all of last year in low A. Carson Dorsey, a 2024 pick out of Florida State, with a pretty good fastball from the left side. We have him in the Keys rotation alongside another lefty with a good fastball, Sebastian Gongora, and then hard-throwing right-hander Iber Cartaya. And just to pull out some interesting names from the bullpen, Chase Alsop, who was in Delmarva's rotation last year, Andy Fabian, who showed pretty good stuff between the FCL and Delmarva as a reliever a year ago, Evan Yates, Jacob Cravey, among some other interesting names there. And then on the bench, we have Colin Tuft, Ryan Stafford, Braden Smith, Edwin Amparo, and RJ Austin. So this feels like a group, and I didn't even mention the designated hitter Victor Figueroa. This feels like a group that where the position players are pretty deep. And you get the sense that they're going to have a lot of fun hitting in that hitter-friendly environment. But I want to start with Nate George. He had such a good first season, but I think we know where he can get better. And one area that I know has been flagged particularly is pulling the ball for power more often. If he's able to do that, how high could his prospect ceiling or his prospect stock go this year?
top 10, top 20 in all of baseball, honestly, with all the tools he already has. And again, we've talked about this before, just playing more under control, channeling the unlimited chaotic energy into a more refined version of it would help as well. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be in Frederick that long, to be honest with you. I think a month here, if he gets off to a hot start, Douglas Hodo's just keeping that spot in AA center field warm for him because, or yeah, honestly, he might even start in AA. I don't think that's impossible if his offseason goes incredibly well and in spring he looks even better than he did at the end of last season. I could see him starting up there, but sky is the limit with George, and the fact that they didn't dangle him in trades, apparently, supposedly. I mean, they just traded 4 guys for Shane Baz, and Nate George, I don't think was really considered to be in the mix there for that. So it's very exciting. Honestly, this entire lineup is impact bats, like tooled up at least. Like even Vance Honeycutt, we know what he can do if he makes contact with the ball, making contact being the key point for him. But Aloy, Irish, Cuevas, even Buche, Figueroa, the only one that doesn't really impact the ball that much is Leandro Arias, but we know he has the potential as just at least a hit tool to be better than he was in 2025. So honestly, this is, if they're batting, and this might be my number 1 team in the org going into I think this was the highest watchability rating, but just the starters, the relievers, and even the bench, when the guys on the bench are in there, like Braden Smith is at second base or RJ Austin's in left field, I'm intrigued by those guys as well. So I'm very big fan of the Frederick Keys back in the system, and look at these logos. It's becoming real. It's pretty cool.
Please have a good broadcast, Frederick, because this is we're going back to the well again, and saying high A is the spot. Hopefully, it goes much differently this year than it did last year. But yeah, Nate George, all the helium in the world. I said at the end of last year, I don't think it's an outlandish statement to believe that he could start the year in AA. Like you said, with a really good spring training, really good offseason. I don't think he will. It's very low odds, but just the fact that we can sit here and say, that's not completely crazy is a testament to like what he was able to do last year. I'm excited to see that. Vance Honeycutt, like you said, I know like everyone is down on him, but I mean, it's what is so frustrating though, is just because everything else other than the hit tool is like elite, can be truly elite. We'll see. The troubling signs was when we talked to John about it. It was that no matter how many, all the different people John Muley talked to for his notes in preparation to create his top 30 list over at Baseball America, it was nobody had it was this why he struggled. Everyone had a different response, and that is a little bit concerning. But to stay on a high note for me here, it's like we know a couple of things I'm going to be watching specifically. We know Wahiva Aloy has the power and defensive abilities to be a high-end prospect, but like, what does the hit tool look like in year 1? Like, in a small sample last year, Delmarva, if you watched him with Delmarva, you saw the same issues that he had in college, some expanding the zone, some troubles with breaking stuff. Like, none of these are glaring issues though, just things that once he cleans up, is going to take his game to another level, which could be like a lot of fun to watch. Not so much if you're on the other side of the ball there, but Irish, like I guess with Caden Bodine gone, Irish is going to see more time behind the plate. So like, what does he look like defensively, and can he keep the ball off the ground? That was an issue for him going back to college. We'll see if he can. It was a little bit too when he was in Delmarva last year. So we'll see if he can start getting more lift on that ball there. You're going to a better hitting environment in Frederick. So I think it's going to allow all these guys to have a much smoother experience, hopefully, settling in first year of pro ball. But yeah, I'm still high on Ellis Cuevas as well, as for like a possible breakout in 2026, get the hamstring issue behind you, get out of Aberdeen. It is troublesome to see that he did play a lot of first base last year in Delmarva, and you look at that outfield, it's even if you put Irish behind the plate and you've still got guys like Braden Smith can play the outfield, RG Austin can play the outfield, like, is there going to be enough room for Cuevas, or is he going to spend the majority of the time at first base again, which again, it's going to put more pressure on the bat in terms of like his prospect status. But I still like the kid, and I agree. I think Leandro Arias at least deserves a look this season. He's still only like 21, I think. He's still really young and has had a lot of injuries up to this point. So not closing the door on him quite yet. And the other guy that I'm personally going to be high on is Colin Yeaman. He opened my eyes last year. I had no idea who he was until I watched him take a 2-2 changeup from Tyler Bremner deep last year when he was at UC Irvine. And then over the course of the rest of the year, like he had plenty of like 110 plus exit velos last year in college, a near 60% hard hit rate. It's a strong hit tool. I think he had a stretch of like 20 something straight games with a hit at one point. I'm pretty pumped to see what he can do. And that's a guy who probably is batting in like the lower half, like the bottom third of the lineup potentially with some of these bats. So just another fun name to add to the list there.
Go over the pitching staff now. I think I tabbed Arcina as a breakout candidate on a recent episode, and to me, that's just a matter of can he throw strikes more consistently? Because what we saw as a fastball last year, pretty consistently riding 95 with that pitch, that has the potential to be something really special. Jirwa, a pick out of Michigan State, there's a lot to like there. Tall left-hander, he's got some velo to the fastball. Carson Dorsey is another lefty that has good fastball data. Missed a lot of time last year as an injury, but after he shook off that initial return where he was struggling with his command, I thought that he pitched really well in the second half. For me, the guy that I'm really going to be watching closely in this rotation, though, is Boston Bateman, because this is someone who came over in the trade for O'Hearn and Laureano with the Padres last year, kind of seen as the prize of that big package that the Orioles got back from the Padres. And everything you read about him, big left-hander, young, second-round pick, just a little less than 2 years ago, actually, with a good fastball. But, Nick, you made this observation on the show a lot last year after the trade, and I agreed with you every time I watched Bateman pitch. He could do a good job of getting ahead in the count, but he often struggled to put hitters away. And I think for me, that's the biggest adjustment I want to see this year. More so, knowing he's going to be dealing with the tough pitchers environment in Frederick, more so than what the ERA looks like. I really want to see how those secondaries look and if he's able to put hitters more away more effectively when he gets to two strikes.
I had a thought about Bateman when looking at all this stuff. Like, you got Arcina, who's gonna probably need to be pushed through a little bit. It's a Rule 5 year, and he could do it. Jira could probably move a little bit more quickly than some of his peers, even though it's his first year in pro ball. But you look at one of the best changeups in college baseball last year, just pinpoint control, fantastic command. It's the whole thing. He's 6 feet 7 inches with a really tough look for left-handed hitters. Arguably one of the most slept on picks in last year's draft class. Like, I think he's going to be an absolute stud. He can move a little bit quickly. Some other guys even behind him that we're going to talk about with Delmarva that could jump a little faster. With Bateman, I don't know why. Like, I could see a scenario where Bateman they let him sit and cook a little bit longer in Frederick, maybe even spend the whole year in Frederick. Because like, he's also a 6'8" lefty. It's hard to find a lefty in the system who's under like 6'5", but he's got the potential for 4 or 5 above average to plus offerings. I could just see the Orioles putting in a lot of work with his stuff and he needing some real time to settle in with those changes. He's working with a bunch of changes. He's working with a new ballpark, a more hitter-friendly ballpark. It maybe takes a little while to click, but then it really starts to click late in the summer. And then people are demanding he get called up to Double-A, but you're like, where are you going to get the innings? We're speaking in terms of like, everyone's going to stay healthy right now because it's January, we can. But we know realistically there are going to be a lot of injuries, and maybe they need him to move up. And there's an easy spot for him to still get starter innings in Double-A at some point. But I could also see that situation where they just say, look, yeah, you're cooking, you're doing everything right, but we're just going to keep you in high A for the rest of the year. Go up to 120 innings. He had 80 something last year. Get up to 120 innings. You're still only like 20 years old. Tell him great job at the end of the year. And in 2027, he's in the Double-A rotation from the jump with a quicker move to Triple-A if it's earned. Yeah. He doesn't turn 21 until the very end of the 2026 season. So I just think he's a guy who I think could be held back a little bit longer, but because the potential is so much there with Bateman, and he probably just needs a little bit more work than some of the other guys, but I'm fine with letting him cook a little bit longer if he's a potential like mid-rotation major league starter as his ceiling profile.
Yeah, I would be honestly surprised if he, other than like maybe the last month of the season, pitched in Double A this year because that clogged pipeline. I mean, unless there's a bunch of injuries, knock on wood, or trades, or who knows what, it's going to be tough for these guys to get promoted to a certain point. I mean, there's a couple spots at the bottom of the Billy rotation that are open, and if Luis De Leon eventually moves up to AAA, that'll create another spot. But I could certainly see Arsenia, Jirwa, Gongora, even JT Quinn skipping past Boston Bateman. We'll talk about him in a minute, but that doesn't mean that things are gone wrong. I mean, he's a young kid with a big frame. It's tough to find a nice repeatable delivery at that point, but he's got a huge potential. They obviously traded for him for a reason. Yeah, this rotation is good, and this bullpen, especially in AAA and AA, it's more of a typical 5 or 6 man rotation, and then more typical bullpen roles, relievers than we're used to for the Orioles. But when we get into the lower minors here is when we see like there's guys like Evan Yates, Juan Rojas, Jacob Cravey, Chase Alsop. These guys are going to pitch multiple innings at a time, basically going to piggyback is what I'm assuming here. I think we're looking at 4 or 5 innings for the starter, and then 4 or 5 innings for the relievers, and then some cleanup spots for the other guys, or not relievers, the other guys in the bullpen that have starter innings. A lot of big lefties in this starting rotation. Gongora trying to build off of 2025. Carson Dorsey looking to be healthy, have a full season under his belt. Arsenia, I don't think it's going to take long for him to get bumped up to Bowie. I was on the borderline of putting him to start in Double A, but I just think it makes a lot of sense. He didn't have a ton of innings in High A last year, but the stuff is so good that as long as he's locating enough to dominate, I think he'll get the bump up pretty quick.
I just looked real quick. Carson Dorsey is listed at 6'2", 180. Okay, I'm 6 foot, so he's got 2 inches on me, and he would be the shortest man in this rotation by like 3 inches. Imagine being 6'2", 180 and looking like a small child if you lined up with your fellow rotation mates.
Cartaya is what, like 6'7", 140 pounds at this point?
I just had it. I think he was 6. Well, we know what the listed weight is. We don't have the updated weights with him. He's listed 6'5", 165. He could be 6'5", 6'6", or 6'6" or so, and 190 plus, pushing 200 probably. He had a huge frame, but yeah, that's a monster rotation right there.
Real quick before we move on, I do want to talk about Chase Alsop. This is someone who really struggled in the Shorebirds rotation last year, and I agree with you, Bob. I don't think that him being in the bullpen should be taken as a sign that, okay, they've given up on him as a starter, because he's probably going to be in tandem, and there's a good chance that even if he begins the year in the bullpen, that he ends up with the majority of his appearances at High A coming as a starter. But what's a bounce back for Chase Alsop going to look like? Because I think any way you slice his numbers at Delmarva last year, it was not good. The walks were certainly a lot higher than we would have liked to have seen. What is it going to take for you guys to look at Chase Alsop's line at the end of 2026 and say, okay, there's at least some signs of progress here?
Just throwing strikes would be a good starting point. A little bit more consistency. Like I made this point a lot too last year. When you watch Alsop, it was very clear when he was in Delmarva, it was very clear stuff-wise, he was head and shoulders above most of his peers down there in Delmarva. But especially the second... the fastball is what he just could not control. There were 2 or 3 starts that I watched in particular. He could not land the fastball to save his life anywhere close to the strike zone. And he was still getting guys to swing and chase on some of his secondary pitches. Like, just throw the fastball for strikes more often, first and foremost, and do it consistently, because he would still have these outings where he looked great for 2-3 innings, and then it would start to fall apart. Or he'd have a stretch of starts where he would look really good and then fall apart. You're like, it's getting better. The walk rate's getting a lot better. And then he'd walk 5 guys. So yeah, it's throw more strikes. I don't even need to see go deep into games. Just piggyback with somebody, piggyback with, I don't know, Dorsey. That could be a guy that I could see them kind of monitoring the workload a little bit, because he didn't really pitch a lot last year, had the injury. So team him up with somebody and say, can you go 4 innings once a week? And just let's get more strikes, fewer walks, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I was delayed because I was trying to pull up his Fangraphs page just so I could have the numbers in front of me. But he struck out 22.8% of batters, which isn't bad, but I was expecting better coming into the season. And he walked 15.4% of batters. Not very good at all. 7.4% K to walk percentage. He had a 4.30 FIP, which is much better than his 5.64 ERA, but you're going to want to get that walk rate at least down to the 10 to 12% range if he's going to have any chance of sticking as a starter. Otherwise, it's time to turn him loose in the bullpen and just see if he can let it eat in there. But yeah, it's the strikeouts can stay similar. Like to see him tick up a little bit, but the walks, and naturally, I think if the walks go down, the strikeouts should go up a little bit. But yeah, you can't walk 15+% of batters. It's just never going to work.
Completely agree with that. And we'll go to Delmarva now. And the Shorebirds and the Keys are tied in terms of having the highest watchability rating, according to Bob's projections, both checking in at an 8.5 out of 10. Now, if you follow the Shorebirds for the last 4 years, you know that there's a particular formula to their roster. This is where a lot of young 19, 20-year-old prospects that the Orioles signed in recent international free agent classes make their full season debut, and it feels like for some guys they hit the ground running, other guys struggle and may actually have to repeat Delmarva before they can really get their feet under them and start to take the next step in their development. You may see a little bit of that again this year, but it's worth noting that you have some good holdovers from last year who either didn't play a full season in low A because they started at a lower level or because they missed some time with an injury. And then in the case of Jordan Sanchez, you got a guy who got a very, very brief taste of Delmarva at the end of last season, and his raw power has a lot of people excited. Bob has him penciled in as the Shorebirds opening day right fielder, joining the outfield by Cam Lee in center and Raylan Ramos, who was with the Shorebirds last year in left field, and going around the horn, Andrew Tess behind the plate, Felix Amparo at first, Jose Mejia at second, Joshua Lorenzo, a good batted ball hitter who has yet to put it into good contact numbers at Delmarva, but shows a lot of raw power at third base. Cobb Hightower, who was part of that Orioles-Padres deal at the deadline, is slated to return to Delmarva as their shortstop. And Luis Almeida, who can move around the infield a little bit, play a few different positions actually, is penciled in as a DH. And then you go over the rotation, which is headlined by Esteban Mejia, who got a lot of love nationally last year thanks to a triple digits fastball that showed up in a big way in the FCL before promotion to Delmarva, where he looked good over a short stint before his season ended. He's followed in the rotation by JT Quinn, a pick out of Georgia in last year's draft that the three of us really liked coming into this season. Killer Morphe, we were hoping for a big breakout from him in 2025. That didn't happen, but he'll make another run at it with the Shorebirds in 2026, followed by Twine Palmer, who was acquired from the Astros in the deadline deal that sent Ramon Arias to Houston. Palmer logged some innings with the Shorebirds after that trade last year. We have him going back to Delmarva to start the season, and rounding out the rotation are Caden Hunter and Hunter Allen. And then the bench here is pretty interesting. Steven Martinez, Miguel Rodriguez, Ariander Mejia, Elvin Garcia, and Brylan Tavera. And then over the bullpen, again, some good arms here. Kiefer Lord, Brandon Downer among those that stand out to me, but there's other names that we could delve into here. Christian Rodriguez, a 2024 draft pick who's going to be pitching hopefully his first full season of pro ball after missing last year with Tommy John surgery. So I want to start with this lineup, and in particular, Jordan Sanchez. We've heard a lot about the power from the left side. We've seen it play out in the Dominican Summer League and then last year in the FCL. What are you guys looking for from him in his first full season of pro ball?
It's just the hit tool. Like, what does the hit tool look like across the full season? Like, we know he's got the power. And for me, like, this whole, with looking at the lineup as a whole, it's who breaks out. Like, that's my big question. And Jordan Sanchez is a part of that. Like, there's some real potential here. There's a lot of volatile profiles. There are huge question marks, but a lot of very loud tools as well. And so, like, my eyes, when I get eyes on these Delmarva bats, it's going to be about who is showing real signs of a potential breakout. Like, we know Jordan Sanchez has the power, but again, it's like, what's the hit tool going to look like across a full season? Steven Martinez, he had a 105 mile per hour 90th percentile EV as a 17-year-old, which is insane, and gets promoted to Delmarva at 17, won't turn 19 until August. So, and he could be in high A right around that time if he has a big year. We know there's a ton of swing and miss and struggle to hit, but he was literally a child last year. So, like, again, big question marks there, but big potential. Joshua Lorenzo, the plus power potential, plus infield arm, pushed aggressively, suffered a knee injury at a critical time when he came to the States that really impacted him. And even Andrew Tess, we talked about a lot, like, especially last week or 2 weeks ago in the breakout prospect prediction episode. Strong hitter, good defender, elite makeup, high level producer as a teenage catching prospect. That whole group right there, if just one of them breaks out, I think it's massive for this system because of their ceilings. And Jordan Sanchez is the old guy, the grandpa of the group here. I'm excited to see what he can do across the full year because we only got 4 days of him last year. A little bit of a tease, but we'll get a full slate in 2026.
Yeah, I fully expect the Jordan Sanchez breakout. Honestly, just looking at this, he stands out. Like, I just feel it in my gut that he's going to put up a monster year, be in Frederick in the second half, and really set himself up nicely in the system. But this was another 8.5 watchability rating for me because a lot of the guys that are repeating the level from the end of last year, I think could make really big jumps. There's some new guys in here. Big question mark in Cam Lee, junior college draft pick, who signed, and I don't know. He didn't get the chance. One of the few position players to get a chance to play last season after the draft. Braylon Tavera, does he really get another season in Delmarva? Does he get up to Frederick on their bench somewhere? Like, I feel like this is a bench where there should be nobody that's just sitting out more than 2 or 3 games in a row. Like, I think all of these guys on the bench will get regular playing time. Steve Martinez, obviously, Miguel Rodriguez and Mejia Adriander behind the plate. Elvin Garcia, I think, is kind of been forgotten about a year ago this time. I think we were very excited about Elvin Garcia. He had an injury-riddled, disappointing 2025, but I could see him bouncing back. Maybe he goes back to the FCL for a little bit. It's really tough to say, but I'm excited for, I think, other than Felix Amparo, who definitely has shown flashes, I think all these guys give pretty good reason to be excited that they can make a big jump and make a name for themselves in 2026. Raylan Ramos, I think he kind of goes under the radar. He had the whole entire season in Delmarva last year, put up respectable numbers, and he's still really young too. He missed some seasons with some injuries. So him finally healthy and building on that, I think we've seen it time and time again. The guys that struggle a lot the first time through in Delmarva and repeat the level, there's a pretty good ratio of guys who have been able to build on that and move forward in their careers.
Yeah, with Ramos, I remember us having a conversation, I think it was like in May of last season, where it felt like Delmarva as a lineup, you had a lot of guys that ran hot and cold. And Ramos was the one who was just steady. And he managed to maintain that over a full season. I agree that I think he will be back there this year. But that's somebody that I think could get a crack at high A at some point. And then someone else who I want to make sure doesn't go overlooked here is Cobb Hightower. If you look at his numbers from last year, they were fine. There's nothing that really jumps out one way or the other. If you want to look at something that was a little bit of a negative, his strikeout rate went way up after he came over the Orioles system, but still, for someone who spent last season as a 20-year-old, full year in low A, to put up an 18% strikeout rate to a 13.2% walk rate, to me is very encouraging. I think there's a lot more speed than what those 14 steals suggest. So don't be surprised if this is someone who, after the first month of the season, has a 110 WRC plus, hitting the ball all over the place, flashing a little bit of speed, and every night you're tuning in, watching, wondering to yourself, why do we have to watch more Cobb Hightower plate appearances at low A? Get this guy to Frederick.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, he really good fielder, really good all-around hit tool. It's remarkable, and it's so easy to forget, even though we're watching this constantly, the offensive environment is it still the Sally League in Delmarva specifically? Hightower for the Orioles in almost 100 plate appearances had a 658 OPS, and that was 2% above average. He had a 102 WRC plus. So it seemed like he couldn't hit a lick. Well, he was above average. So if they can get him some weight training, a little bit more muscle in there, maybe some bat speed training, impact the ball a little bit more. Yeah, I think he's still really young. He's definitely got some big upside if he's able to tap into that.
I mean, when it was MLB Pipeline that tagged him at the beginning of last season when he was in the Padres system as like their breakout star potentially. So he's got some respect in the industry as well. Yeah, two final notes I had on the hitting side were Miguel Rodriguez and Elvin Garcia. Miguel Rodriguez was a top 30 prospect last year on some lists. Strong hitter, and another catching prospect in the system, but a very strong hitter, good prospect. And he missed last year because he fractured his ankle early on in like a really gruesome injury at first base. So we'll see what he looks like if he can add to that catching mix again in return. And yeah, I wanted to point out Elvin Garcia because I think he could emerge potentially as a hot name this year. I have him 45th on my personal top 50 list. I didn't look if you guys had him on yours or not. He didn't crack our overall top 50, spoiler. So he won't be on any of those episodes. But they gave him $500,000 back in 2024. And after his DSL debut, which was very good, you had Ben Badler over at Baseball America proclaiming that Elvin Garcia could be one of the best shortstops the Orioles have ever signed out of the Dominican Republic. So like that's like super high praise. That's how good. I think he walked more than he struck out. He had a really good year. DSL All-Star. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, injuries last year. I think it was a hand injury. There were a lot of questions. I went back. John Muley did say it was a hand injury last year that he suffered through because there were a bunch of Elvin Garcia questions in his Baseball America chats. Shout out to anyone who's listening and dropped an Elvin Garcia or Steven Martinez question in John Muley's Baseball America chat. We know you're listening. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I want to see what he can do. I want to see if that hand injury was something that just impacted his entire year. And I want to see if he can have a nice little bounce back in 2026. Just a name that, like you said, yeah, has kind of gone completely forgotten. Can he kind of reclaim a little bit of his prospect value this year?
Before we go down the short season levels, what are your guys' thoughts on this rotation in the bullpen? We've talked a lot about Esteban Mejia. It seems like he should be poised to take a step forward in his first full season. JT Quinn is a guy that I know the three of us are pretty high on coming out of Georgia. And then you hope that Kiefer Lord, coming back from Tommy John surgery, is able to make a statement right away, because go back to the 2023 draft. This is a guy we were very excited to see the Orioles pick.
There's a lot to be excited about here. I'm super excited to see JT Quinn. I know we've talked about it a lot, but electric arm. Obviously, Mejia. No, you don't even need to say that. I mean, top 100 prospect according to Baseball America, thrown up to 102 last year. Mark in the chat says, where do you expect Mejia to end the season? I'd say Frederick. I mean, I could see him first half Delmarva, second half Frederick, one of those types, unless he really goes ham. And who knows, maybe he gets up to Bowie by the very end of the year, but I wouldn't expect that by any means. Very excited to see if Keeler Morphe can rebound from a completely lost 2025 after being so hyped up after 2024. Not by us. We would never do that. And then there's a bunch of names that we didn't get to see pitch, or barely got to see pitch after the 2025 draft. Caden Hunter Allen. That's going to be tricky. Holden DeJong, Kalen Hampson, Brian Arancia, Denton Biller, Christian Hernandez from 2024. Like you said, it's just a lot of guys that I think are breakout candidates just based off of the past couple of years with some of these draft picks. So, yeah, excited that it's a bunch of guys, new names that we get to learn about and get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I ran through all the pitching draft picks last week because I chose that's the group that I'm watching the closest this year. That was my pick in last week's episode. The 2025 pitching class is the minor league storyline I'm most excited to watch. And so I gave my thoughts on each of those guys last week, but I will throw out Twine Palmer's name quickly just because, like, 19th round JUCO pick of the Astros, who the Astros gave him almost $200,000 to sign a couple of years ago. Comes to Baltimore in the Ramon Arias trade. He's 6'5", gets a ton of carry with the fastball. He's a big-bodied guy. I only sat and watched one of his outings, and he flashed some injury. You can see why. I think his Fangraphs, who was like, he's like the little like data darling kind of guy that they've got their eyes on. I don't know. JUCO arm. He's only 21. Give him an offseason with the Orioles tweaking some things. I want to see what he looks like. He did struggle with the control last year when he came over after the trade, but I think before the trade, he was doing like the fastball in the zone. It's only like 92, 93, but I think he's got like 19, 20 inches of induced vertical break on it. And it was just a whiff machine in the zone. I don't think you saw too much of that when he came over after the deal. So I want to see what tweaks they make with Palmer. And, I think there's a little bit there. I don't know how high the ceiling is there, but like he's more than just a fun, unique first name. Like there's some pitching there with him.
There's a lot more than what meets the eye there. I watched a couple of his starts, and unfortunately, I think he was out of gas after the trade. But there were moments after he came over last year where you could see the stuff.
Yeah, Vivek doesn't call him Twine the Divine on our Discord for no reason other than it sounds good. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by him as well. And Ramon Arias, another masterclass. He could still come back to Baltimore. He was DFA'd or at least non-tendered. So, get something for a guy at the deadline, and then he's readily available a couple months later. Gotta love it.
Have Andrew Kittredge and Ramon Arias back on the roster with Wilfie De La Cruz and Twine Palmer, just a masterclass of a trade deadline.
We'll head down to Sarasota now, the FCL, and there's always guys that we're looking at the FCL roster at the beginning of every year, trying to figure out, all right, who's our breakout candidates here? And I think that right off the bat, the guy that jumps out at me is Wilfred De La Cruz, who Nick just mentioned, came over in the Andrew Kittredge trade with the Cubs at the deadline last year. Pretty much a walk machine in the DSL last year, but shows a lot of intriguing power, young infielder. A couple of other position players to note, Lisandro Sanchez, Jamon Newell, an infielder who posts good exit velos, all starting the DSL last year. He could build on that in the FCL this coming year. Jaden Loray, this is a guy that I don't think we've talked about a whole lot. 5th round pick out of a high school in Arizona last year in the draft. The Orioles were able to get him away from a commitment to BYU. He's going to be someone that I'm watching closely coming into this year. And then in the pitching staff, Kelvin Zapata. You heard it here from Nick a few weeks ago. That is a breakout candidate to watch in this system. Connor Gear is somebody that Bob has tabbed as a pitcher to watch. He has him slated for the FCL's bullpen. So, admittedly, we still have a lot to learn about some of the guys on this roster. But you look, and there's some interesting players here, not to mention someone in DJ Layton, who a year ago looked like he might be a breakout candidate, but unfortunately missed some time last year because of an injury.
It was weird with Professor Layton because he didn't really go on the official injury list, and he would like pinch run sometimes, but then he didn't play a lot. So clearly something was up there. I'm guessing his upper body, considering he was still running. But yeah, I'm excited to see him get another shot. And Jaden Loray, certainly him and Cam Lee, probably like the two most unknown hitting prospects that the Orioles drafted, where it's like 5th round high school pick. That's very Daryl Hernandez of them, but this was a guy that wasn't like on anyone's radar, I don't think. So I think I'm kind of excited to see what the Orioles saw and what they've been able to develop so far with him. I think he can play a little bit of infield as well. Again, one of the guys I know the least about in this system. So I think those two guys, Layton and Loray, are big time breakout guys, candidates. But man, even just looking at the international guys who are coming up from the DSL, you mentioned Noel, who I just released the countdown episode on today at number 48. Juan Ortega had a great year last year. I think he was in the FCL. I can't remember. It's hard in the middle of the offseason to remember who was in the FCL, who was in the DSL. But Wilfred De La Cruz, who John Muley's Baseball America Top 30 was released either today or yesterday, and he was in the top 20 for Orioles prospects. So the guy you got for Andrew Kittredge, who is now in the Orioles bullpen again. Starlin Miesis was a breakout guy last year in the DSL. Same with Lissandro Sanchez, Hector Campuzano. Emilio Sanchez hasn't really broken out yet, but there's still tools there, clearly, given the amount of money that was given to him. But to circle back around, I'm kind of expecting DJ Layton to earn his way up to Delmarva before the FCL season ends. Something tells me he's going to be much improved from last year.
Yeah, I'm most excited to see, to learn more about Jaden Loray. Yeah, he's just a guy you don't know a ton about. He's got some great videos. He's out there in the cages, posting some workout videos, which are fun. It's getting about that time where everyone should be in the cages, posting all the videos. You get the sounds, the good baseball ASMR. Should be back in full swing here in the next couple of days. But yeah, I'm excited to see him. But for me, like the big three here on this roster, as far as the hitters are concerned, it's Wilfred De La Cruz, of course. There's still a lot of belief that he's going to develop into this big time power hitting shortstop or third baseman. And I think it was Ben Badler again who noted after the DSL season that he was most impressed with there was a lot less swing and miss than what was expected from De La Cruz. So a positive sign. And Starlin Miesis and Lissandro Sanchez are just, I think they're going to be a lot of fun. Miesis is a dude. Baseball America has this hit plus metric. I went back and found this article again. So their hit plus metric combines contact rate, overall contact rate, and end zone contact rate, 90th percentile EV, chase rate, barrel rate, and expected weighted on base average on contact ex Wobicon. Miesis was the fifth best 17-year-old hitter in the league last year. That's all of minor league baseball, which probably just constitutes the Dominican Summer League at that point. But the contact rate needs work. It was like 70% or so, but he had a 103 mile per hour, 90th percentile EV, just an 11% chase rate and an 18% barrel rate, and gets super high praise for his swing decisions. And Lissandro Sanchez is putting up EVs north of 110 miles per hour last year. I think he got like $300,000 signing bonus, and Miesa signed in like April or May. He was a late signing. So yeah, those three bats are going to be a lot of fun. And I went and pulled it up again, because mentioning Connor Gear, and I'm glad, I know, Bob, you did shout him out recently, and I completely whiffed on him in my last week episode, doing the quick rundown of all the draft picks. Just to pull it back up again from the text I got, his scouting report on Gear. Connor is a lean, athletic guy, good projection to the body, fastball 88 to 91, up to 93, some glove run and sink, show some carry up in the zone and get some swing and misses with it. Slider 78 to 81, more depth than break. Deception with the changeup that's 80 to 84, still needs to work with it. Mostly fastball slider guy right now, but it's working on adding multiple pitches. Throw strikes, player development will love this guy and his ability to throw strikes. So some high praise from a scout in the organization. Excited to see what he can do as well.
Some great clay to be molded there. You add a few ticks of fastball, you give him the pitches, you tighten up some stuff. Yeah, I think Connor Gear, we're going to be gearheads in Birdland.
Let's wrap up with the Dominican Summer League. And one thing to point out here is that we have no reason to believe that there's only going to be one DSL team, but for the purpose of Bob's exercise, he usually will just do one DSL roster, highlighting some of the big names that we expect to see there. And if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to the podcast, there might be some names that you either see now or that you're about to hear that you don't recognize just yet. And that's because officially they're not in the system, but they are expected to sign with the Orioles as part of the upcoming January 15th international free agent class. Shortstop Jose Luis Acevedo is expected to get the new club record for signing bonus. Ariel Roque is another prospect that is highly touted in the upcoming class. He's tabbed to be in center field, while Acevedo is penciled in at shortstop. Andrew Hidalgo, regarded by some outlets as the best pitching prospect in the upcoming international free agent class. The left-hander is expected to sign with the Orioles, and Bob has him at the top of the DSL rotation. This is a fun group, a group that, as with the FCL, we still have a lot to learn about these players. And this is a taste of what we're going to be talking about next week when we break down the international free agent class. But just to give a little bit of a sample here, Bob, I'll start with you. What can our listeners expect from this DSL team?
It's interesting, right? Because it's going to be a much smaller international signing class. So that's one reason maybe they could be going down to one team. Something tells me it'll still be two teams, and they'll figure out a way to make it work with some not cheaper, like the minimum signings that don't go against the limit. But I think, again, the Orioles, it seems like, just continue to get better and better at this international signing stuff. More success rate, I feel like, as time goes on as a group. There's obviously been, Samuel Basayo. There's been some standouts in the earlier classes, but man, it just seems like Jose Pena last year, I have him repeating the DSL this year because he was so young last year, 16 most of the year, if not all. Chance he could go up to FCL. He performed pretty well, but just have him repeat DSL here makes a lot of sense to me. The 4 big position player signings, all over $1 million. You mentioned Jose Luis Acevedo at shortstop, Ariel Roque in the outfield. Also have Pedro Gomez, not the NFL sideline reporter, in right field, and Gabriel Rosario, who's like a catcher first base outfield. It seems like he's basically just a huge bat that mashes the ball at his extremely young age. And then I have some other repeat performers. Yeson Acosta was a big signing from the previous international signing class. He did not have a good 2025, but we've seen this before where guys that are highly talented, sign for a good number, don't have a good first season, they repeat the level, and then you're like, okay, I see what we have here now. Similar thing with Ronald Torrero and Michael Barrow on the infield, and Fabian Cordero in the outfield. The 2 Chirinoses, they're still in the system despite Robinson not being. And yeah, there's definitely some interesting names just to keep our eyes on as we watch the YouTube stream and look at the box scores.
I was trying to pull up, see what this guy had done. Random fact about one of the Chirinos is there, Franier Chirinos. So he was signed in 2024, part of the 2024 class, shortstop prospect out of Venezuela. And the numbers not very good in the first 2 years in the DSL, a career 190 hitter with a 640 OPS. I think he's transitioning to pitcher. I legitimately think he's going to be pitching. I saw this, I think it was either this morning or yesterday on Instagram. He's got videos of him pitching, showing off the fastball and the changeup, but not like I'm taking BP and I'm having some fun, like actual videos of him pitching. So something fun to keep an eye on for the fellow deep sickos out there.
Or is it Shohei Chirinos now?
Based on the DSL batting numbers, let's just hope he can get the ball over the plate on the pitching side. But yeah, this group, of course, all the new guys, there's only so much you can say that because we haven't gotten our eyes on any of them. I'll just throw out a couple of pitchers real quick, and I'm gonna pull this up from my DSL recap article. So, and actually, I think you had Alexander Diaz here. I don't know if you had him in the DSL or the FCL. So Alexander Diaz was the guy that I highlighted. I got a $110,000 signing bonus, a 17-year-old righty. He was up to 95 miles per hour last year with his fastball, a couple of breaking balls already. I thought that watching him in the views you can get on the mound, I just thought his entire repertoire looked way more advanced than a lot of the other guys in the DSL last year. So I think Alexander Diaz is a fun name to watch. Junior Medina is another name that I had highlighted. He's also 95 plus with the fastball at 18 years old, 6'2". And then fun name here, Juanier Perez. Is he on the list? Yep, you got him in the bullpen. Perez, he signed in late June. A little bit of an older arm. He turned 20 in December, but he was 5'11" and was 95 plus as well last year in the DSL and threw a bunch of strikes. So those are my couple of arms that I'm going to be excited to watch again next year.
Yeah, and since we're on the DSL, and I forgot to mention it when we talked about, I want to say, Frederick, Nakel Cruz. What are they doing with this guy? I'm so confused because I think he was only in the DSL because he hadn't pitched in a while. Maybe he was already in the Dominican, so let him pitch there after they signed him late for decent money. Put up decent numbers, but obviously the competition is not exactly something of a measuring stick for him. So I don't know if they're going to try to make him a starter somewhere in the middle of this organization, a lefty reliever. Very confused by that. But if I'm looking at one pitcher on this list that I'm excited to keep track of in 2026, it's Emmanuel Pena, who I know he got some money in the last signing period. Did not have a good 2025 season whatsoever, but clearly stuff is there, and they thought enough of him as a pitcher to give decent money to. So I'm excited to see how he rebounds.
And before we wrap up here, I'll just go around of the projected rosters that we've talked about tonight. Which one has you guys the most excited? And Bob, I'll start with you here because you put together the watchability ratings for us, which I think kind of give us a glimmer into your thoughts. But if you had to pick one roster that you're looking at right now and you're really looking forward to tuning in or just following along with them for the first time next season, which team is it?
If Frederick has a good broadcast and camera, it's them with the bullet. But it's between them and Delmarva for me as far as just the depth of offense and pitching and everything. Those two combined, but I'll say Frederick because they have some top 100 type of talents going out there every night.
I got to split it up. I want to say Norfolk for the pitching because to go off what I talked a lot about in last week's episode, this staff right there is where a statement is going to be made, I think. Between Gibson, Herman, Wells, pick a bullpen arm, pick somebody in Double-A, even in Double-A right now who ends the year in Triple-A, Jerron Watts-Brown or Blake Money, some of the older guys, more advanced guys who I think could spend a majority of the year in Triple-A. I just think this pitching staff here is going to speak volumes about the pitching development in this organization. And I know, again, a lot of people nationally have been coming around and highlighting the young pitchers in this system as like true potential starters here in the major leagues. But I think this is where this group finally puts everyone on notice. And I just think with the bats, I feel just so confident in last year's draft class that I'm gonna go with Delmarva for the bats because of, like I talked about, that whole group there. There's a lot of guys with loud tools and questionable profiles and major question marks, but it's like I want to see one of these guys truly have a breakout year. Like we've been waiting, and it could come from Bowie and it could be a Thomas Sosa, but I want to see one of these like international bats that has huge question marks. I really want to see them just outside of Samuel Basayo, obviously. I want to see one of these guys just have a true breakout as like, this is the Esteban Mejia, how Esteban Mejia was on the pitching side last year. Who's going to be that on the hitting side this year? I am intrigued because when you're bringing in a very small 2026 international signing class with a bunch of high dollar bats, I want to see that this organization can get these guys to the next level.
So my answer is kind of similar to Nick because my viewing habits on MILB TV are that I always start with the best pitching matchup of the night, and then we'll flip around to the other games from there. So most of the time, I'm going to be tuning into Norfolk first next season. But if I had to go based on the lineup, I would go with Frederick, just because I think that top to bottom, that is the best group of hitters, good group of prospects. I'm really, really excited to see what Nate George is going to do. But Delmarva, I think that lineup has the potential to be really good. And with Chesapeake, you know, if a couple of those hitters are able to rebound a little bit, that could be a better lineup than we expect. And just for reference for the viewers at home, if you want to pencil in dates now for when the full season minors begin, Norfolk will start its season March 27th at home against Nashville. And then the following week is when it will fully get underway. And the good news is that the three teams below them are all starting with places that, at least in the past, have had good MILB TV feeds. The Bay Sox will open at Hartford on Thursday, April 2nd, which is the same night that Frederick's season. Well, actually, Frederick will open the following night, Friday, April 3rd at Hub City, which is Spartanburg, South Carolina. New ballpark that opened last year, pretty good feed. And Delmarva will begin its season Thursday, April 2nd at Salem. So be sure to circle in those dates now. And before we go, Bob, I want you to tease something that's coming to our YouTube channel next week before our main show.
And now for something completely different, we're going to be doing Orioles Jeopardy, 2025 Jeopardy, hosted by Eli of the Warehouse Podcast. It's going to be Orioles on the Verge versus Locked On Orioles versus the Baltimore Banner Podcast. Get your popcorn ready. Tune in to the YouTube, subscribe, rate, review the podcast feed. It'll go on as well. So, yeah, that should be a lot of fun. So just want to give some bonus content here early in the 2026 season because it's going to be a good year. I just have a feeling, and my camera just crapped out on me, so I'm going to stop talking.
We will be on Thursday night next week for the main show, but we will have Orioles Jeopardy in between now and then. You can also check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member today. You can join the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to our top 50 prospects countdown, which is just getting underway. So be sure to check out all of that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.